Hello everyone, Gaara here and welcome to a brand new video. Today I'm gonna talk about the current state of Hearthstone. If you have been active on the Hearthstone subreddit the past couple of days, you would have noticed that there's a trending topic that Hearthstone is in the worst state it has ever been and so forth. I'm gonna share with you some of my opinions and talk about the issue a little bit. This is a huge topic and yeah, I cannot cover this in a very short video. I could talk about this for hours, you know, because every little thing in the game has its reason, and yeah, it's an own discussion on its own. So I have a pretty good example for how I would describe the balance or the current state of the game. But before I get into that example, I wanna talk about a general thing. In my opinion, the game has never been more balanced than right now. Boom! Honestly, I think the game is not that bad. There's a few cards that are absolutely no-goes. The two biggest problems right now are Yogg-Saron and Tuskarr Totemic. And if you've been watching streams, those are the cards that frustrates streamers the most. But not just streamers, but also pro players. Let's go over those two cards quickly. Yogg-Saron is, if you looked at the recent preliminaries or the past, I'm representing the EU region, so I'm focusing a little bit more on the EU preliminaries. But yeah, it is basically the same for all regions. But Druid was the second most popular class during the EU preliminaries, and Yogg-Saron Druid, how we like to call it, was 98% represented. It's like there was only one deck that was a Beast Druid, but every other Druid had Yogg-Saron in it. And why is this an issue? Because it's just one card, right? I mean, what if you don't draw it? The thing is that most of those decks are built around this one card that we call Yogg-Saron. One of the ancient gods, and those decks have a lot of card draw and a lot of removal, and all those cards are usually spells. In Druid we play Nourish and Ref and cards like that, where we draw our deck very quickly, and we will usually end up drawing Yogg-Saron. It's not like that we if you compare it with a Cartoon Druid, where we have some games where you just don't draw a Cartoon because the deck is very minion focused and you don't draw as much. But in a Yogg Druid or Yogg Mage or any deck where you play Yogg, you play a lot of spells and you play a lot of card draw because you wanna draw Yogg-Saron and you wanna slam it down. And usually when you play against one of those Yogg decks, you will end up facing Yogg-Saron. And the problem with Yogg-Saron is that it can bring you back from any board state and any life total. I had 4 games in a row, and I streamed those games where I was on 1 HP. No, my opponent was on 1 HP. I wish I was on 1 HP. My opponent was on 1 HP. I had a full board, also a board with a lot of Death Rattle minions. One of those games I played Hunter, and I had like 2 Savannah Hymens and 1 Call of the Wild on the board. My opponent was on 1 HP, and he played Yogg-Saron, and he ended up winning that game. And I think the problem is that then in that mind state, I was like 100% sure I'm gonna win this game, right? There's nothing my opponent can do to come back from this board state, life total, you know. But, you know, he ended up like using Master Spell and then Twisting Nether and then healed himself, and then I was out of cards, you know, and he drew a bunch of cards, and yeah, that's it. It's not even, you just need like a sequence of 2 or 3 good spells in a row and you can beat, yeah, any board state. Just what I just described here. Master Spell as a first spell, and then you need 1 board clear. And the chance if you used up 12 to 15 spells during the game to clear the board is above 80%. There's actually a pretty good topics on Reddit. You can search for it. I might put it in the description. Some people have calculated the exact numbers of first spell usage, how high the chance it is for you to draw cards, to remove the board, and all that stuff. I think that's a big issue. We never had a card like that where you just lose, you know. No, it brings you back into the game, you know, and you cannot do anything about it. Like, the best thing you can do is just play a lot of taunts, play a lot of Death Rattles, bring your opponent as low as possible. Really, you cannot play around it. But the worst part is that the opponent, the guy that plays the Yogg-Saron, he doesn't really plan anything out either, right? All he does is just spam spells, play as many spells as possible, and then slam down Yogg-Saron. This is such a stupid way of playing the game, right? So one player knows he cannot do anything about Yogg-Saron, and the other player doesn't even know what Yogg-Saron is gonna do, but the card does good stuff on average, like way above average. So, but obviously you can just lose the game with your own Yogg-Saron. The first spell could just be Hellfire and you just end up losing, right? But it can completely turn around the game from any board state, any life total, any deck size, any hand size, no interaction whatsoever. Yogg-Saron would not be a problem if a niche pick like Major Domo, for example. But it is not the case, unfortunately. Yogg-Saron is the most played late game win condition in Hearthstone, in competitive Hearthstone right now. And that is ridiculous. Like my first tweet was, when Whispers of the Old Gods came out, oh my god, if this card becomes competitive Hearthstone is screwed. So, before I go into the next card, another thing, a big problem about Yogg-Saron is that I touched on this, I think in one of my recent videos, is that there's a lot of removals, like Deadly Shot, that only go against your opponent. Betrayal, Deadly Shot, Assassinate, cards like that. And all secrets benefit you. All card draw benefits you. All like summon minion cards also benefit you. So on average the card is pretty damn good. And the mana value you get from this card is usually 40, 50 or whatever, which is absolutely bonkers. So should we remove this card or ban this card from competitive scene? Yes, but it will bring some problems with it, and it is probably not fitting to talk about this in this video. But for example, Druid doesn't really have good removal. This is why we play Yogg-Saron in the first place. Besides that, the card is pretty good, unfortunately. Druid has Mulch, which is a terrible card. You're basically forced to play Mulch because BGH was nerfed, and Yogg-Saron, like Druid, is really bad against death rattle boards like Ends of Paladin, whatever, with Tyrians and Cairns. Druid is horrible. We have no silence and there's no good removal for Druid. So without Yogg-Saron, Druid would struggle a lot. And I don't know if the Beast Druid would be good enough to just replace it, but probably will, because Menagerie Warden is also a pretty busted card. But yeah, Yogg-Saron, big problem, we don't like. Next card is Tuskarr Totemic. Tuskarr Totemic is actually above Yogg-Saron in my opinion in terms of being a terrible card in the competitive scene, and it's the biggest problem right now besides Yogg-Saron. I leave it up to you which card you want to rate worse for the competitive scene, Tuskarr Totemic or Yogg-Saron, but nonetheless both of those cards are a huge issue. The bigger issue with Tuskarr Totemic is that it comes down so early on the board. Sometimes I feel like the guys at Blizzard are not even playing Hearthstone themselves against each other, because with all the new cards they're introducing, like they're introducing new 2-drops and stuff like that. But we have new 2-drops like the Netherspite Historian, which is a 1/3. But one of the most popular classes that is played on the ladder and in competitive is Aggro Shaman. And as we all know, Aggro Shaman has Totem Golem. And if an Aggro Shaman plays Totem Golem on turn 2, you cannot really play another Spite Historian on turn 2 to contest the Totem Golem. I don't know how this is supposed to work, but yeah. So you kind of have to balance out the curves of the classes a little bit more. I don't know, man. So we have Shaman that has a pretty damn good curve with Tunnel Trog, which is the strongest 1-drop in the game, and then Totem Golem, which is the best follow-up 2-drop in the game. And yeah, Tuskarr Totemic doesn't fit in that curve, but Shaman will very likely, with all the 1-mana removal cards, have the board very often. If you're not playing against Zoo or another Shaman, you will most likely have the board by turn 3, and then you play Tuskarr Totemic, and that is the biggest issue. And then you have a 3 in 7 chance to usually just win the game, because you roll Flametongue Totem, Mana Tide or Totem Golem. 3 in 7. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that this is way too high chance to just win the game on the spot. In my opinion, Mana Tide is the worst one. If you give an Aggro Shaman a free draw engine and the opponent has to spend resources to remove that draw engine while he's struggling just surviving, he will end up losing the game. I think I lost 90% of the games where my opponent rolled Mana Tide as an Aggro Shaman. It is already very difficult to just deal with the common Shaman threats like Totem Golem. Almost every class has no removal that can trade with the Totem Golem 1-for-1. I think there's none, it's just Soulfire, I guess. But yeah, besides that, that is a big problem. And the second biggest problem about the Tuskarr Totemic, it comes down so early. Not just that the chance, I think the biggest problem is that the chance is too high. 3 and 7 is way too high to just win the game. But the second problem is it comes down so early in the game that classes just don't really have the tools at that point to deal with that. And the snowball effect from that roll is just so high that you just usually end up winning the game. There's a few examples I can bring from that, but you guys are watching the streams, you guys are following Reddit, you guys know. You probably played against shamans yourself with Tuskarr Totemic. You play the mirror match, you play Tuskarr, you roll a normal totem, he plays Tuskarr, he gets totem golem, he says GG, well played, and that's it. But besides that, I think Hearthstone is in the most balanced state it ever was. Shock. Besides those two cards, which are insanely big issues, and I don't know why they're around for so long, and I'm very scared that Yogg-Saron might be around for another 2 years. And I told that to Hamilton. I told him that Hearthstone is fine. Like, Hearthstone is really not so bad, how people put it, if you go to Reddit. I think it is pretty balanced. The game was much worse when Unleash costed 2 mana, or Net Pagel drew your card at the end of the turn. I mean, what the fuck? Miracle Rogue with Leroy Jenkins, with Auctioneer Conceal for a turn 5. It's just ridiculous. That was like ridiculous. And Savage Warforce of Nature was absolutely insane as well. All those combos were, yeah, absolutely broken and non-interactive. But with Yogg-Saron, we cannot even predict what is going to happen. The Yogg-Saron can just end up winning you the game, but most of the time he will just screw up your board, and you cannot really prepare for it. It's like nothing you can do except just playing Aggro Shaman and killing your opponent, you know? The game emphasizes you to, as soon as you try building control decks, you will get so frustrated if you face an Aggro Shaman, he plays Tuskarr Totemic and gets a mana tide. It just happens too often. Or a Totem Golem, or a Flametongue Totem. And then he just ends up winning. And then you go back to your old Zoo deck, or to your old Hunter deck, or to your old Druid, your own Yogg-Saron Druid, or you know, your own Shaman, and you're basically forced by the game to do that because it's so frustrating to lose to those types or those cards because they're so dominant. I think the game is pretty balanced besides those two cards. I wanted to bring up, in the beginning of the video, I wanted to bring up an example of how do I like the game. Right now, if some random legend player would challenge me to a money match, I would not accept the challenge. Not because I think I'm not good enough at the game or whatever, but I think my edge is not good or high enough to a best of 5. If you're a random legend player right now, you're pretty familiar with the meta and you're playing pretty solid decks. And my edge of beating you in a best of 5 is probably just 5 to 10%. And I think this goes for almost any pro player. That is not very high, and I wouldn't blame the balance of the game and cards like Tuskarr Totemic or Yogg-Saron, which definitely have an influence on that percentage. But I think the card diversity and the amount of playable cards, this was a huge issue before Standard came out, that the card pool is just too small. And even more cards cycled out, so our card pool is much smaller. Yeah, everyone said, like, also Blizzard said, it's no problem, Naxxramas is cycling out, all those stupid Death Rattle minions are cycling out. We will go back to the vanilla cards, you know? People will go back to Yetis and River Crocolisks and whatnot. But no, we are not going back. If new cards are introduced, like Totem Golem, we are not gonna play River Crocolisk on turn 2 to contest a Totem Golem. That's never gonna happen. So the card pool is much smaller. So we have those big issues with the super broken cards like Yogg-Saron and Tuskarr Totemic, where we build tier 2 decks around them, we perfectionize those decks, and we have to beat those decks with other decks, and the card pool is so small. Like, if you build any deck right now, you usually have just one card available for each mana slot that just fits in, you know? Even if you build a dragon deck, we have a 1/4 mana dragon that we play, which is Twilight Guardian, because we don't play Twilight Drake usually, and we have a Zoo Drake for 5 mana, we have the new Bookworm for 6 mana, and we had no real 6-drop before that, because the Draconic Crusher was just bad in a control deck, and usually you just have one card per mana slot. You know, we have those 25,000 9+ mana cards, but they're all too slow for the meta and they're unplayable. So if I want to beat like a random legend player, I want to come up with some new deck that is really powerful, that I mastered, but that is just not the case right now. The new expansions just came out and there's like a few new deck types viable, but usually it's same old, same old. Tempo Mage got buffed a lot, Zoo got buffed a lot, Druid got buffed, you know, Shaman got buffed. You have Dragon Priest that got buffed a little bit, you know, Rogue got buffed a little bit, but those on Paladin the same, but they're all still like pretty in the dumpster and pretty bad. The meta doesn't really change too much, and usually it is just one dominant archetype for each class, except we play Warrior, because Warrior doesn't just have 10 viable deck types, probably got 2 new ones in addition. But the thing about Warrior is that Warrior has the best removal in the game, the best answer for... Don't get me even started with Warrior. I think this is like a too big of a topic to just cover it in this video. But Warrior is just great. Warrior is the strongest class in the game and it's awesome. But yeah, I don't see the game changing too much in the near future. I think this meta, if we don't get any balance changes or a new expansion in the next time, I think the game will stay the same for a few foreseeable future, and I think this is what a lot of people are afraid of, and people will not just come up with some crazy new decks as well just because, yeah, I mean, the card pool is just too small. What can I say? I don't know how to fix all of the issues. I have some ideas, but I haven't like really thought about this because it's not like I can change the game. I have some ideas. If you would ask me about how will you change certain things, then I know how I would that. But another big issue is also the formats in tournaments, which is not good, that we have single elimination where almost everyone plays the same decks, which is a very, very big issue for the competitive scene. But yeah, this video is already long enough, so thanks everyone for watching, and if you like this type of content, then let me know in the comments. Press that like button if you like this video. If you like this content, I will make more in the future. For me, it was just fitting to make a video about this because so many people are concerned because there was like 2 big Hearthstone teams disbanding in the past few days, and then this whole topic came up with, oh, Hearthstone is just bad, Hearthstone is that, and no, Hearthstone is not that. I really like Hearthstone. There's a few cards that if you would change them, I think Hearthstone would be an amazing game, but we need more cards. We need to get a better tournament format established and we will have a pretty damn good game. And I love you guys and see you guys in the next video.